So today we're going to do a quick chat on the illusion of time in story. So what do I mean by this? Well, when we're watching a movie or reading a book, we obviously understand that what we're seeing isn't real, but there's still a sense that it is real, and there's still a sense of time passing within the story. There has to be. Like, a story can't happen all in one instant in time. It can happen in a second. That second could be really dragged out and turned into a whole story, but there's still going to be a sense of time happening, of things changing and growing and becoming different. Change is the key element here. Time is really just a way to observe things changing and perhaps observing how long they take to change. That being said, we could also go the other direction in our story and say 10,000 years passed. And it's our story, so 10,000 years just passed in the span of a few words. So what I'm getting at here is that as authors or storytellers, we have almost too much power in that we can make 1,000 years happen in an instant or drag 1 second into 10,000 words. So we've got these two extremes of the spectrum, and we've got to find a balance somewhere in the middle that's going to create an interesting sense of motion for our readers, but still give us time to help put all the details and important things into our stories to make them more compelling and exciting for the readers. So that being said, how do we do this? How do we create this illusion of time that is properly compelling to our audience without being too boring? Because one of our big fears as storytellers, and this is more relevant in my generation's era than ever before, is an audience's attention span. In general, young people are going to have shorter attention spans than older people, but we're seeing more and more people in my generation, Gen Z, who have terrible attention spans. TikTok is killing their brains. That's a whole another rant that we don't need to get into, but the point being said, we need to pay attention to how quickly we are creating a sense of motion and progression and time, so that we don't lose our reader, but we still have time to put all the interesting things that we as authors and storytellers really want to get into our story. So before we can really break down how time works in fiction, let's look at how time works in real life and take what we can learn from that to help apply it back to fiction. So this will be a brief tangent, but it's pretty useful to think about and interesting. So time, as far as we experience it as humans, is constant. Well, we know it's constant, with a brief caveat that black holes mess things up, but we don't deal with that in normal life. So time is basically almost constant, but we perceive it in a non-constant way. So humans perceive time in a relative manner. So what do we mean by this? Well, let's take a great example by Vsauce. You should also check out this video. So let's say we're at the doctor's office, we're waiting, pretend like you don't have a phone either. The nurse receptionist tells you it's going to be 15 minutes. So you're sitting in the boarding room waiting and waiting, and it's really boring and slow, and even though it's only 15 minutes, it feels like it takes forever. The clock is ticking so slowly. But once the doctor's appointment is over and you're driving home afterwards, it kind of was a blink. You don't really think about it. It doesn't take up much space in your memory. The memory of it is almost compressed while the experience is elongated, because it was only 15 minutes, and we know 15 minutes is 15 minutes, but some 15 minutes feel a lot longer than other 15 minutes. So let's switch to another example. This is kind of the opposite end of this spectrum that we're developing. So let's say we're at an amusement park and we ride a roller coaster. So the roller coaster may be a 3-minute long ride. And as the ride is happening, we get on, they strap us in, and we go, and then it's over. And that was really fast. But when we think back on it in our memory, we have so many vivid images and sensations and impressions of all the different turns and curves and the feeling of elation as we flipped upside down and all the awesome stuff. So even though it was only 3 minutes, it's occupying so much more of your memory than that 15 minutes in the doctor's office did. But like I said, when it happened, we got on and suddenly we were getting off, and how fast the experience felt as we perceived it. So what we're looking at here is kind of two extreme examples of the density of novelty within a certain amount of time, or as I like to call it, the NDF, the novelty density factor. I completely made that up, but it sounded cool. So the NDF is going to affect how we perceive time. Durations of time with the high NDF, meaning lots of novelty within the experience, like the roller coaster, they're going to feel like they happen very quickly while they happen, but in our memory, they take up quite a surprising amount of space. But if we compare that to the doctor's office, we barely remember it at all, even though it felt like it took forever because there was so little novelty in it. So what we have to remember is that we're humans, and a lot of our perception of time is going to be based on novelty. So let's take that back to story and fiction and figure out how we can use that to our advantage. The amount of novel things that we give to the reader, you can think of them as nuggets of information, or if you've seen my other video on promise, progress, and payoff, you can think of these as bits of progress. So every time we give the reader a little bit of information or progress, it's going to create that sense of forward motion and intrigue and excitement, and it's going to help lure the reader back in. It's like every time when you scroll to a new TikTok, you get that little hit of, oh, there's something new. We're kind of trying to create that same effect with the books, only we have to understand that it's harder. TikToks are really, really entertaining, but books require active effort. So they're going to be more work, but readers generally are willing to give that more work if they are readers, if that makes sense. Regardless, the more information we give to the reader is going to affect the pacing. Another important thing that we need to think about as we are determining our pacing is going to be our target audience. If we are targeting children, we need to pace things quickly and keep them engaged. If we are targeting older people, we have a little more leeway in packing more dense information and concepts and detailed ideas into our nuggets of information. And so while this takes longer to unpack and delve into and clarify, it's ultimately theoretically capable of giving the audience more profound and emotional reaction. So if emotional reactions aren't important to you, you might just be more willing to breeze through a novel. But if we take something like Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, which spends some 4.4 million words covering a roughly 2-year time period, we have so much time with the characters that we develop an intense and deep understanding of them and their struggles, their inner conflicts, and their backgrounds. And all of this will lead to some really powerful payoffs in the later book that just have a way of, really hitting the reader hard because they've spent so much time with that character and they empathize with them so powerfully that it's inevitable that they feel these strong emotional reactions. So in general, that's a little bit about how time affects the audience's interest and involvement in the plot. Just be aware of it and think about it actively. Don't just blindly follow rules, think them through, and make the intelligent decision for your story. If you liked this video, please consider liking or subscribing or commenting with any feedback. Or if you have any cool ideas relating to this whole concept of time in fiction, please elaborate below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And that is all. Thank you.